Day 2016. Looking to Council for disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Seeing paper shuffling and nothing else, we'll move along. No delegations and no broad sweeping presentations, so we move into staff reports. First one up is the Electrical Vehicles Chargers Ontario Grant Program, and I understand the deadline is coming up very soon for this. Cassandra, did you want to say a couple of things to begin with, and then we'll go to questions?
Thank you, Chair Henry. To Chair Henry and members of council and members of public, staff have been working on this grant application, or the idea of this grant application, over the past couple of weeks. And on Friday, we found out that we have 3 interested parties in doing a joint application that where we would be the lead. Those organizations are Waterloo Campus, the Boardwalk, and Waterloo North Hydro. So with council's approval of this report, we would continue to work with those organizations to have a joint application and strengthen that application for the City of Waterloo.
And I take it in a joint application that may defray operating costs for running some of this if they pick that up.
Through you, Chair Henry, the defray of the operating costs would be any EV units that would be installed on the Waterloo campus location or on the Boardwalk. The original operating cost of $8,000 per year for the city locations would not be defrayed at this point.
Okay, no, fair enough. Councillor Freeman, I have first.
I wanted to better understand, which is the museum lot?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Freeman, the museum lot is at the corner of Herb and Father David Bauer. It's to the left of the Canadian Clay and Glass.
So the old train station that the tourist train used to pick up at. Yeah. Councillor Whaley?
A couple of questions, Cassandra, that we talked offline a little bit about. The report reads like the government's going to pay for the installation of these units, but the citizens of Waterloo are going to subsidize the cost of electricity of $8,000 a year for those people who want to get their Teslas recharged. And my question to you is that the case?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Whaley, the cost of $2,000 per unit is actually to cover the train processing costs, the cost to have toll-free software. The hydro costs that would be related to this, we anticipate having a fee, like a user fee, so that if you charge, that you would pay that user fee. So there would be no intent for the City of Waterloo to be paying for the electricity for any vehicles charging.
It's great to know. So we don't pay for citizens' gas and we don't pay for citizens' electricity to drive. My question is relating to my next question is relating to the partners that you talked about. So all the stations in the report are on city-owned land, and now we're talking about stations that are not on city-owned land, that are on private land, but there's still a requirement for the city to have some costs relative to those stations?
Through you, Chair Henry, Councillor Whaley, no, there would not be any intent where we would have any costs by those. We have a letter of intent from Waterloo Campus where they've agreed that they would pay any operating costs. The grant application encourages partners, and businesses are eligible to apply on their own. However, it is more favorable if you have a partner. So the thought was that if we have a joint application where the province can choose which units they want to or not want to install, that would be more favorable for all of the citizens.
Any other questions, Council? I understand just at the auto show the other day that that GM unveiled a potential, $30,000 electric vehicle to be the first ones to come under that bar, not actually Tesla. So these things may be coming more fast and furious than we'd anticipate. And so getting ahead of the curve and following along with the environment first and green policies of the city. For leadership, thanks for working this up, Cassandra, and hopefully we find some success, as do our business partners. Looking for a mover, Council. Mayor Jaworski, Councillor Whaley, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We have Ms. Reynolds' budget follow-up report number 2. I imagine there'll be a number of questions on the report itself, but we also have presentations, wondering whether we want to handle the presentations first and speak to those and then the general report, or vice versa.
Through you, Chair Henry, My recommendation would be to start with the presentations. They might offer some insight into the different parts of the report, and then perhaps questions after that.
Yeah, plus we also are imposing on other people's time, so let's try that. Gary Scanlon, I think, is up first. Talk to us a little bit more on the growth paying for growth aspects. So, Gary, welcome to Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to be before you. I've been asked to basically present a presentation we've made through the government finance officers down in the United States and the municipal finance officers here in Ontario. And generally is talking about the topic, does growth pay for growth? I think generally, and just a little background, our firm's been doing municipal finance and development charges probably for almost 35 years. Personally, I've been into the game for 36 years, working for municipal government, and then 25 years with Watson. And we've analyzed the impact of growth from the smallest of individual applications straight up to official plans and secondary plans. So some of the background I'll provide is resulting from that work. I think generally there's a perception that when you create a new home, there's new taxes, and that revenue should be sufficient to pay all of the costs associated with the new home, as well as any of the new operating costs that arise from servicing the people. I think that a lot of time is because you can quantify that dollar amount. Here's a house, here's the taxes, the money up front. Trying to assess the capital and operating costs becomes far more difficult because you're normally looking at something on an individual home. And it's really when you start to look at it on the broader sense, maybe 100 homes per year, that's 300 people per year you're adding to the community. Over 10 years, that's 3,000 people. Over 20 years, that's 6,000 people. A lot easier to take a look at the individual impacts when you can amass it on a greater scale. With development charges, just to take a note, and this the third bullet there, there's also the perception that development charges pay for all the infrastructure. It doesn't. It was when we first had the Development Charges Act back in 1989, it was close to being full cost recovery. In 1997, when they overhauled the Act, there's a number of reductions, deductions, service limitations, service standard calculations, etc. Really, a development charge today probably recovers somewhere in the range of 75 to 80% of the cost of development. So right on the capital side, the fees they charge, there's a loss. And then when you take a look at all the operating programs and such on top of it, it tends to be not full cost recovery. Generally, residential don't pay for themselves. Non-residential tend to pay a net positive contribution to your development. I'm going to go through a couple of slides here, keep it down to perhaps in the range of 10, 11 slides. And what I'm drawing from is we've undertaken a model on behalf of the municipal finance officers in the province of Ontario, and it's something to assist municipalities in analyzing the impacts of growth. It can be scaled down to individual developments. It can be blown up to look at official plans, and it can be focused in on looking at things such as intensification versus greenfield. So we tried to build this very expansive model. It's something that you would need to work with both your planners, your engineers, as well as your financial people. And it's really looking at the impacts of growth on all the different services. So what we've included in that model is the links between the land use patterns and then the capital cost as well as operating costs and revenues, and then trying to see how that flows through. And what we wanted to do, I think the ultimate goal is to be able to inform, especially at the official plan level, when you're developing your official plan, there's policies that are coming forth and staff are asking you to embrace these policies. It allows you to at least be informed on the financial implication of those policies. You'd be able to vary it, kind of say, what if we did this instead of this? What would be the implication? So ultimately, this will be available to municipalities at some time into the future. And what we're trying to do is provide some tools to assist you in those decisions. Just without going into horrendous detail, but this is really, from a conceptual perspective, if you look at how information flows through your municipality, and it flows from planning, engineering, and through to finance and other departments, you can see how this very simplified model exists within your own realm. On the left-hand side, you can see there's the development. You either have commercial, industrial lands coming on stream or residential lands, and you can see that those land areas and the amount of growth. If I go down to the bottom here, these yellow lines here, or the yellow boxes, represent the investment in capital infrastructure, the starting point for any type of analysis. This infrastructure that you'll have to build to accommodate the growth. Even before the growth is there, you've got to have the water, the wastewater, stormwater management, and some of the road infrastructure has to be there. As the people come on stream, you then have to provide the recreation, the parks, etc. So we have a lot of infrastructure that has to be constructed to support that growth, and then we take a look at the financial opportunities to pay for it. The very localized services, quite the off-site, is where we have to take a look at our development charges and any other opportunities to recover that growth. Often the developers pay for the internal water mains, sewer, roads, etc. Development charges pay for about 75% of the costs. So there will be a net impact that ultimately comes onto your property tax base as well as your water and wastewater user rates. Just looking at operating expenditures, which is, and then some of the operating costs are driven by population and employment. You need to provide the recreational programs, the skating, the training, the swimming programs, etc. They're activated by the population. And obviously, collectively, they'll hit the bottom line at the appropriate time. The orange boxes are the revenue side, and the most common is the assessment and what you're paying in taxes. That's the one we started with, and you can identify that. But as well, there's a lot of non-tax revenues that come on stream, fees, fines, fares, etc., which are part of the financial equation. When we add them all together, as I say, generally, what you see is a net negative impact over time. And I'll try and explain some of those in a minute. The model and what we do analyze when we do these types of things, we look at all services. We look at the whole spectrum, because for DCs, there may not be full cost recovery. That doesn't mean that they don't have to be constructed. You have to construct those works, and you now have responsibilities. And so a lot of times there's this disjoint between the immediate development, the immediate revenues, and then the creeping cost that you're going to have to face some point in the future. I think it's probably best described as the infrastructure gap that we all try to deal with over time, and it's been quite in the forefront of municipal finance discussions. And if you think about it, most of our big growth period was after 1945, after the Second World War. A lot of investment in infrastructure. And here we are, roughly about 60, 70 years later, and we're feeling that pressure of having to revitalize, replace, renew all of that infrastructure. And it's the same thing here. Every time the additional growth occurs, you're taking on a future liability. And as I say, a lot of times we're just coming to grips with that cost, and that's been incorporated into the model. Just really quick, what I'm going to give you is very simple results on some of the stuff. The model's been out, it's been tested. We've looked at 4 different municipalities. There's another round of testing that'll go on this year. And so far we've had 2 suburban municipalities, rapid growth municipalities in the GTA. So we get to take a look at the really faster growth municipalities. We've got some slower growth, but an agricultural community just outside of Hamilton, and then bedroom community just outside Ottawa. So we're trying to test the model. We've had very good feedback. A couple of probably